Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Vallaeys. I'm your host and I'm also the CEO and co-founder at Optimizer, a PPC management tool. For today's episode, we have one of the most influential voices in PPC, someone who's got a big opinion on Performance Max. And he has a big opinion because he's been using it very extensively. He knows all the ins and outs. And so today we're going to talk to Menachem Ani from JXT Group, and he's going to share how he's been using Performance Max, as well as using other campaign types, and basically getting to the roots of how to use all of these Google ad systems to get the most out of it for your business and to make sure we're not just shooting for vanity metrics or looking at inflated ROAS, but actually getting results that makes clients happy and makes them keep coming back for more from agencies. So with that, let's get rolling with this episode of PPC Town Hall. Hey, Menachem, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on.
It's great to be on. It's always good to talk.
Yeah, last time we talked, I was in person for the Google Marketing Live, I believe.
Yeah, that's always a fun time. Always exciting to hear the new things and try them out.
Yeah, well, hey, let's jump right into that. So I know we're going to talk a lot about Performance Max, but the new thing since last year is AI Max. Is that something you've had a chance to play with?
Yeah, we've been playing around with it since it's been in beta. I kind of like it. It really does help you expand your search campaigns. But my recommendation is use it when you would use PMax because it's a lot. I think a lot of the same underpinnings. Taking the pieces of search and shopping and bringing it to your search campaigns where it makes sense.
Right. And so, to maybe give people a little bit more context for those of the listeners that haven't met you before, but where do you get all your experience? What does JXT Group do?
Sure, we're a digital marketing agency. We manage campaigns for mid-sized clients. Typically, it's a mix of lead gen and e-commerce. So, we learn the best of each discipline and kind of apply it to each other. So, a lot of times we'll try things from e-commerce for lead gen and e-commerce. Try different strategies and really figure out what works for our clients.
Okay. That's great. And so, one of the things I know you've been writing and talking about quite a bit is when clients come along, maybe start with a new agency, maybe start advertising for the first time, the expectations can be quite high, right? And I think part of that maybe comes from the fact that everybody's doing AI searches now,
Yeah.
and AI likes to stroke people's egos and maybe make it sound a little bit easier than things really are in life. And so they come in with huge expectations. But what's the reality that you see when people start with a campaign, say like PMax?
The reality that we're seeing is that today the ad platforms are a lot more algorithmic than they've ever been, which just means that it takes longer to get started because you used to be able to set up a Google search campaign and just capture high intent traffic and go. And you can still do that, with a very granular setup. But if you really want to build a strong foundation for growth using the AI tools and be able to scale past, like you really got to show the algorithm what's valuable for your business. So it can take a bit of time to set up the right tracking, the right keywords, the right ad copy, get the conversions rolling, and then really build on it. So I think I just tell people patience more than anything.
And let's go a little bit deeper on that, right? So is that patience related to a specific amount of time? Is that related to a specific number of clicks, impressions, conversions? Where's that sweet spot that
Yeah,
you see?
it's probably a mix of all the above. Like you're starting out, you're looking at the soft metrics in the account, you're looking at your impressions, your click-throughs, your cost per click, all that stuff. You want to make sure that you're spending your budget, you're getting the right traffic. And as it starts to scale up, obviously you need to make sure leads come in or sales come in and you're hitting your KPIs. But the first thing is traffic. A lot of times if you start a campaign jumping too early to max conversions or conversion value, the system doesn't know where to go. Sometimes it works well out of the gate, but a lot of times we find start off in a more manual way, force data through the system, and it'll learn faster from that.
Right. And you're specifically referring there to the bid strategies that you would select.
Yeah.
So you're saying basically, would you go manual CPC, maximize conversions before switching to more of a ROAS or CPA limited model?
Yeah, so I think depending on the campaign type, like for lead gen, I like to start out with manual CPC and phrase match. Just let it get like very good quality traffic through, measure some good conversions. With e-commerce, I'm a little less cautious just because the system will get revenue and it'll know. So I'll start out with like a max conversion values or something like that. Just let it jump right to it and it'll learn a lot faster that way.
Hey, and I'm happy to hear someone say start with phrase match because I'm kind of a fan of phrase match too, and I take a lot of flack for that. But like, what's your thought process around liking phrase match?
So it does depend on the industry and the volume. If it's a low budget campaign, definitely start with phrase match because you want the best quality clicks. But as you scale, it'll restrict you. It'll hold you back. And so you have to layer on broad match, AI max, PMax, all that stuff if you want to scale beyond a certain point, which is important for many businesses.
Right, and so I think the nuance there is that exact match is obviously too specific. For a
Right.
new campaign, you can put in exact matches once you see the search terms data coming in and you find your winners and losers and you use exact as negatives or positives to maybe bid differently, maybe set different ads for them. But broad match, I suppose, can also be a little bit overly aggressive, right, in the beginning. So it's
Yeah.
basically telling Google, hey, go and do anything you want. Whereas phrase match is still kind of like that sweet middle spot, which gives them a little flexibility, but not too much.
Yeah, and especially in industries where you have very nuanced keywords, like if for newer accounts as well. Like I mentioned, if the algorithm doesn't really know what a good conversion is for you, the broad match with max conversions can really go very wide. Whereas if you start with, let's say, phrase match, it won't go as wide. Let the system understand what's a good conversion, and then add broad match later. I find that does better.
Yeah. Now you said good conversions. Um, Explain a little bit what constitutes a good conversion, and to what degree would you focus on quality versus quantity?
Sure. So for any lead gen campaign, the number of leads is less important as the number of leads I can sell a service to. So if you're getting a ton of leads, but your client is not able to close any deals, that's really what we're trying to stay away from with all of this. When it comes to e-commerce, again, because we're tracking revenue, I'm less worried about all this stuff, and I'm much more willing to rely on the algorithm and the broad targeting to get where I want to go.
Now, I think it was you, but we were at Google giving feedback to a bunch of the product managers at Google Marketing Live. And the point of understanding the business that we're working with came up. Um, and so we as marketers, we can only do so much, right? We can basically direct someone to your landing page in most cases. But what happens at that point is really up to the business. So to what degree do you think businesses are doing a good job with the traffic that we send them? And what's maybe the biggest mistake that you see them make that they could improve on?
So that's something I think about a lot because we'll launch two campaigns that are very similar for two different companies, and one will do a lot better in that regard. And like we do see a huge variance in close rates just based on the intake process or how fast they're calling leads. Like we have one client, he'll call leads within 30 seconds any time of day, and his close rate is a lot higher than anybody else because he's aggressive and he runs after it. Whereas, so it's definitely a big piece, and it plays a huge part of the success of the campaigns, but it is out of our control. I try to give, guidance and advice to people to make sure they're following a good path. But I think the biggest piece we could do as marketers is make sure that the leads we're delivering are sellable, that they can turn into a paid customer for the client.
All right. And then what tips and tricks do you have as far as setting up the conversion data pipeline so that it feeds back to us? But because ultimately, I mean, we could be sending them leads and
Yeah,
have a very poor understanding of what actually constitutes quality. And so we could even look at a lack of a close rate and then start to
right.
assuming it is due to us having poorly targeted, when in fact it is maybe the fact that they didn't pick up the phone to call that lead for 2 or 3 days, and that's why they didn't close
Right.
because they'd already bought from someone else. So how do you make sure that that data quality is high?
So it definitely comes from both places. The first part is obviously the search term reports, making sure that you understand the client service, what they're selling, and that your keywords really line up. But then setting up offline tracking where it makes sense. I think for smaller budgets, it's not really worth the time and effort because you need, I think, at least 30 over the course of a month. I'm not sure if they changed that, but unless you're getting 30 qualified leads piping back in, it's not worth the setup. But in an ideal world with larger budgets, we'll connect Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever the client's CRM is, and send a conversion action whenever there's a qualified lead or a converted lead. And the goal would really be to use that, especially in PMax for lead gen, to use only that as opposed to just tracking leads, but tell the system which ones are the good leads. So go after more. Instead of looking at your cost per lead, look at your cost per qualified lead. And that could make a big difference, but you need enough data. You need, probably at least 100 leads coming through on a monthly basis to get a decent number of qualified leads.
And like, what systems do your typical clients use to pipe that back into to you, and then you into the Google Ads system?
So if they're using Salesforce or HubSpot, there's a direct integration. I think Zoho also has a direct integration. If they're using something else, which a lot of our clients are, we'll typically use something like make.com or Zapier to just send the data back and forth. It's fairly easy to set up. You got to be a bit technical, but once you do it a couple of times, it's easy.
Yeah, I'm curious. So make Zapier and 8N.
Yeah.
What sort of the difference that you've seen between them? Because I'm certainly looking at some of these newer tools like N8N.
Yeah.
Zapier's always done a really good job for what we needed it for, but like, what would be a good use case to maybe go with something a little bit newer?
Yeah, I mean, I find a lot of our clients are gravitating towards Make just purely based on price. It seems their pricing is a lot more competitive than some of the others. And it end I'm just starting to play around with, so I'm not as familiar with it, but it seems to be, it's a lot more advanced, a lot more AI forward. So, we'll see. But at the end of the day, you just need something to kind of pull that data back and forth so that you're not relying on, manual uploads.
Yeah. And to what degree do you think agencies should step into business consulting? Because I know that's been a bit of a debate as well. And kind of the framing is that as more of PPC tasks can be done automatically or through AI, what is the value that you as an agency bring? And so some people have argued it is just becoming a business consultant, but then others have argued that no, the client hires the agency to do things in the ads account. They don't hire you to be a business consultant. So where do you draw that line?
So I think for me, like we've always been a bit more of like the boutique approach, trying to help wherever we can, even if it's outside the account, just to provide extra value. But I think that at the end of the day, if I'm spending somebody's money, I want to make sure that it's going to work for them. And so if there are things that need to get done, whether it's, setting up a better landing page or more deeper end-to-end tracking, we always try to jump in and get it done so that we can help them grow their business and grow our business alongside them.
And now with the whole consumer shift towards doing generative AI searches and using ChatGPT, using Gemini and Google, have you seen that change the volume, first of all, that you get on more traditional campaign types? And how do you and your clients think about making sure you play in these new surfaces that are taking more and more volume?
It's definitely something we're thinking about a lot. I mean, the whole world is changing. In a year from now, it's going to be even vastly more different than it is today. And so we're just trying to stay ahead of everything. Like, ChatGPT just announced that they're going to be putting ads inside generative AI, and Google's been talking about ads in AI mode for a while. So it's starting to get there, but it's still very early stages. I think one of the biggest things I would tell people is take advantage of it as soon as the option is available to you, because it'll likely be, you'll get that first mover's advantage. Traffic will be much cheaper. But I haven't really seen any meaningful declines in any of our client campaigns in terms of search volume. I think Google, is very smart about how they roll these things out. I don't think it's going to impact their, the revenue, their bottom line. They'll figure out a way to make it work. And so, we're just paying close attention and pushing forward.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested in getting ads on OpenAI, please leave a comment or reach out to Optimizer. We have access to the inventory.
Okay.
So we can get you in there. So yeah, and then speaking of AI, and like obviously there is this huge shift that you're alluding to where we don't know what it's going to look like in a year from now. But talk to me about what is your perspective on the future, first of all, of agencies?
So it's definitely shifting, but I think it's always been shifting. It's just this is going to be a bigger shift than what we've seen in the past. Um, like I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and like I've seen a lot of different iterations of the Google Ads app platform. I've seen the rollout of Meta ads, TikTok ads, and a lot of the other ones. I think that the agency just needs to provide more value in the overall strategic marketing, and developing the strategy more end to end, like I mentioned, instead of just sending traffic and reporting on what you see in Google Ads, to make sure that you're actually driving the business forward, generating net new revenue for the client, and really being more of a partner and less of like a siloed agency. And then obviously leaning into all these different AI tools to figure out how to make the work more efficient, and provide more value for customers. It's not even about like, yes, some tasks are being handled by the automation, by AI, but maybe now that gives us more time to do something even better and drive more value than we did before. So I don't know. To me, change is exciting. It's daunting, but it's exciting, and we'll find the best way forward.
Yeah. And as far as like career advice, I don't know if you're hiring at the moment, but if you were to bring on new people onto the team, like what kind of skills would you look for that are maybe different than what you traditionally looked for?
So I think the I've always liked the attitude in someone where it's like, let me just figure this out, instead of asking a lot of questions or how do I do this or waiting for instruction. The type of person who just sees something and goes, huh, let me try to figure this out. That's probably going to be more valuable now than ever, because there is so much more to figure out with AI. The curious person who asks a lot of questions and tinkers, and just tries to get it done, really just make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. And the pace of improvement or change is so rapid right now. Um, I mean, I don't know if you have a perspective on picking a horse in the AI race. Have you picked a horse, or are you kind of playing between Claude, OpenAI,
So I'm kind of
Perplexity?
playing. I'm kind of bouncing around a lot. I find myself literally going from Claude to OpenAI to Grok to Gemini. I think at the end of the day, Google has a lot on their side between baking AI mode into search, and then obviously Google Workspace. They have paying subscribers who don't need to pay extra for it. I think like there's a lot that they can really push a lot faster, I guess, than somebody like OpenAI who has to build the whole functioning business underneath it. So I kind of think Google will land ahead, but time will tell.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying there. And for us, there was a subscription to OpenAI for the team, but then when Gemini adds that to the existing workspace plans, and it does cost a little bit extra, you have to upgrade, right? But it makes sense because you also then look at, oh, do we need a Zoom license
Right.
in addition, or does that higher plan then have like the advanced Google Meet capabilities? And so they certainly have an advantage there where it just financially makes sense
Yeah.
to start using that one. And so long as their tool is good enough on par with all the others, and right now you might say in some ways it's the best that's out there, so then it's a no-brainer to go that direction. Um, yeah, so that's certainly an advantage. And I think the other advantage for Google is the fact that they have so much data, right?
Yeah.
They have all of my many, many years of Gmail, of Maps data. Where have I been? So if I ask a question to their assistant, yeah, it knows me better. It kind of knows what I'm likely going to respond to, and that's
Yeah.
helpful to me.
Yeah. Google does have a tremendous amount of data across many different areas. It's video, it's text, it's email, it's meetings, it's ads. So I think that Gemini will land further ahead than people think. Even though ChatGPT right now seems to be the big one that's in like the general consumer's mind. Like I think the kids, they call it chat. So
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl, but what I found interesting between the ads for the AI companies was that Google's Gemini ad wasn't super explicit about it being AI. People often probably don't really equate Google's
right,
capabilities with AI, but it was a brilliant illustration of how it could be useful in
right,
everyday life. And it was also not very chat focused. It was image generation focused and sort of, ways that the technology will improve your life in a way. And I thought that was great because it did speak, I think, to the average person who doesn't really care about Gemini versus Claude versus
yeah,
GPT. they just want to get stuff done. And it's like, oh, here's a cool way to do something that I couldn't do before. Let me try it out. And who cares what backend it runs on?
Yeah, I would agree with you there for sure.
Yeah. Um, all right. So let's go back to some of the hands-on PPC stuff. But I know that you've also talked about sort of the fundamentals and the timeless principles of advertising. And I think that's super relevant because as we see so much evolution in campaign types and how you set these things up, what are sort of those fundamentals that you think people really need to pay more attention to?
So with everything, keeping in mind those fundamentals is important. So Google Ads, the platform, primarily is based on capturing search intent. Somebody's searching for something that you're selling, put your ad, let's go. I think all the recent iterations are Google trying to move beyond the intent, you know, because if there's a limited amount of searches happening for your keyword, all these new algorithmic features can take you beyond it. But I think like the important piece I tell people starting out is just start with the basics. So if it's e-commerce, you're gonna, you might want to start with a shopping campaign, pull in search volume, collect data, what's working, what's not working. And for lead gen, it's just the basic search, get traffic, get leads, get phone calls, close deals. Once you have some data, then you start to layer on some of the more advanced things like performance max or demand gen or AI max, and try to go beyond it. But ultimately, you can't sell something to somebody who's not your customer or has no interest in buying it. Like, you do have to remember the stage of the funnel that the campaigns sit, and the purpose of each campaign type. So start with the basics and then layer on additional as you're looking to expand beyond it.
Yes. And so I hear you advocating for some of the basic campaign types. And it's interesting because you're saying PMax is the more advanced campaign type, whereas I think Google would position it as it's the campaign type for everyone. You don't really need to have done much advertising in the past. You don't need to figure out things like keywords. Just tell us your landing page, your budget, and we'll figure this thing out. Right. But
Yes.
but obviously the audience listening here today is a bit more advanced than that.
Yeah.
So for us, how would you frame this?
So I think it's important to remember like how each of the campaigns work. Like, shopping is basically looking at your product titles, descriptions, finding keywords and matching it to people's search queries. So it's going to be a little bit, I'd say, more towards the bottom of the funnel. PMax, it's more simple from what it might need from someone to set it up, but it's a lot more advanced in what it's capable of and how it works. It'll, besides for running those shopping listings, it'll do retargeting, it'll do standard search and shopping, it'll do display, video. And so it can find customers in a lot of different ways. And if it's not set up the right way, it'll just kind of recycle your very bottom funnel traffic. And if you really wanted to, like, drive new business, you have to think about everything else you're doing and how you're setting it up. Because if you set it up one way, it might drive a ton of brand search. If you set it up another way, it might drive a ton of generic search. If you're running advertising on Meta with large budgets or any paid social, PMax will largely recycle that traffic, and you won't see like a meaningful lift in your overall metrics. But if you set it up in a different way, it can really push new traffic. And I think that those are some of the things that I try to tell people to think about, is like how everything is configured. Are you including brand, excluding brand? Are you adding search themes? Are you putting creative, or are you just relying on your product data feed? So there's are you targeting new customers or new customers and old customers? So there's a lot of different things it can do, and so it's simple, but it's complicated.
Right. And so, yeah, you mentioned a lot of factors there that you need to consider. If people want to learn more about that and get some of these specifics, where should they look? Have you blogged about that?
Yeah, I have on our website. You can go jxtgroup.com. We have a fairly comprehensive article on JX, on PMax, and how it works. And there's definitely a lot more than people think about when it comes to PMax.
Yeah. Um, and so, one frustration with PMax, especially very early on, was that it was taking credit and inflating its ROAS from sources like remarketing, brand. Now, Google has added a lot of measurement capabilities and they've added targeting capabilities. Do you feel satisfied at this point, or how do you look at PMax and how it's measuring itself?
So to me, I think the biggest piece of PMax and how it's different than a regular campaign is that you can't make changes directly. Your changes that you're making are basically pulling the algorithm in a different direction. And so they've uncovered a lot more data. You could see like the channel performance breakdown. You can see breakdowns of whether your spend is going to display, video, whether it's coming from creative assets or from a data feed. So there's a lot you can see there. I'd love to see more from Google in relation to, is the traffic coming from which specific audience? Like, is it new customers versus old customers? You can't see as much as you'd like to there. But also like how much of it is coming from retargeting versus like completely new traffic, because even if you connect your customer list and tell it only go after new customers, it's still going to be retargeting website visitors. And if you're spending a ton of money on Meta, it's largely going to be just, retargeting to Meta traffic. So there's I wish there's a bit more data around that kind of stuff, but I'm definitely pleased that with the amount of data they've unlocked for us over the last year or so.
Yeah. And hopefully more to come in terms of
Yeah.
what they add to it. And it's always funny too, right? I mean, it had so few options in the beginning, and that made it somewhat easy. But then now there's so many options that, like you said, it's there's a lot of considerations,
Yeah.
decisions to make, so it does become quite difficult in a way. Now, let's talk specifically about e-commerce for a minute. Advertisers here have the option of running a feed-only PMax campaign, or they can have a traditional shopping campaign. When do you use which, and do you ever use a combination of both?
Sure. So I think the first rule of any e-commerce setup, whether it's shopping or PMax, is make sure that each product is only in one campaign. If you have it in more than one campaign, it kind of fights with each other and it just reduces efficiency. But then, how do you know, like, should you use standard shopping? Should you use PMax feed only? Should you use PMax with creative assets? I think for me, it starts with what type of product you're selling. If you're selling something that's highly commoditized, like think about like digital cameras or appliances, you probably want to stick with shopping. There's a ton of search volume around those types of products. People are searching, they're ready to buy. Those are the kinds of products that don't really succeed, let's say, with meta ads. So they probably won't do well with creative assets in PMax. So either just shopping or like a data feed only PMax. But if you're selling a product that's very visual, maybe like fashion and apparel, or even cheaper items where you do have success on Meta, then I tend to push more towards PMax and likely with creative assets, especially if you're seeing success on paid social. So that's kind of like the main consideration. The other thing I would think about is also the length of your purchase journey. So for items that take like a day or two to buy, you don't really need the retargeting component as much. But if you're selling a product that might have like a 30-day consideration cycle from when somebody first looks at it until they buy it, you might want that retargeting piece of PMax to just stay on top of the consumer's mind. So I think that those are like the main things I'll think about, is like what kind of product, what stage of the funnel the consumer is, and how long the purchase journey takes.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, we're now in 2026. We've been talking about PMax for a long time. What is it that you would say people need to stop doing in 2026 related to PMax, and what is it they should really double down on?
So PMax specifically, I think the biggest thing is don't just set it up, try it, and then be like, oh, it didn't do anything, forget it. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of different ways you can set it up, and try different things, lead it in different directions, see what works, what doesn't work, look where the traffic is coming from, where the traffic is going to, what landing pages, and just at the end of the day, it's like everything else. You got to test it and test different strategies within it and see what works.
Yep, always be testing.
Yeah.
Um, here's one from my. This is called the spicy questions. I don't know how spicy these are, but do you think agencies are over relying on PMax? because it maybe in a sense it can be easier to manage. I know you say it's harder to manage, and I know you're one of the people who does it right. But what bad agency behaviors have you noticed that kind of piss you off because maybe they give agencies a bad name?
So I don't like to talk bad about other people, but I'll tell you that like when you see a PMax that's just like all products lumped into one, set up with very basic configuration, missing like a lot of the granularity that's available to you in the sense of maybe missing search themes or first party audiences, or it's like why. Another one is when it's set up to inflate the revenue by giving like new customers a higher value. So if you set it to target to bid higher for new customers, you can say like a new customer is worth 100 extra dollars. That like inflates the reporting by $100. It's so there's things like that where it just looks better than it is.
Mm.
Or if you have a PMax where it's like the whole budget is going towards the client's brand, and then like it's not really driving any new business for them. So it's those kind of things where you're just using it to sort of pad the numbers. That's frustrating, but a lot of times we'll revamp it 30 days, 60 days in, and all of a sudden you're seeing a big lift in Shopify revenue, as opposed to just in platform, and that's really nice to see.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, you said it kind of pisses you off when you see all the products being put into a single PMax campaign. And I know this is a big question, right? Because you also mentioned you need 30 conversions over a 30-day period for the system to really be able to do a good job. Now, I've always said this is 30 conversions of a certain conversion type, and I think you can split it between campaigns and the system can learn. Not everyone agrees
Yeah.
with that. Um, so if you disagree, to tell me your opinion. But
I,
but
I
but,
believe
but
I
like, what
believe
is your
you're
idea?
right. I
Okay,
believe you're
say that
right on
again.
that. Sorry, we're cutting out, but I believe you're right on that. It's 30 of a specific conversion type over a 30-day period. Um, but I think like everything else, it depends. If you only have 20 conversions and a really low budget, definitely keep all your products in one campaign. But as you grow and scale, it makes sense to segment out, better performing products, seasonal products, different categories with different goals.
And so then break it down for us between additional campaigns, additional asset groups, additional listing groups. Like, what does the actual structure look like? And
For
then
sure. So
let's have an imaginary client here. But what if you have that decent enough conversion volume? Say you have a couple hundred products, you have a couple hundred conversions per month. Like, how would you structure that?
So I think the way to think about it is try to mirror like the website navigation in as much as much as you can, because if the client has three top level categories on the website, that's a good starting point. Three campaigns with all those products underneath it. Typically the reason to do that is so now you have budget going to each of the categories that are important to the client, whereas if you put them all in one, the spend might be skewed just to one specific category, or like it ends up PMax ends up pushing a lot of the spend towards the best performing areas. And so by segmenting that, you can give them different budgets, different target ROAS, different sales goals. And it's good to have diversity, because if something goes wrong in one, or a product runs out of inventory, at least you have something else to rely on. The other thing also is, a lot of times, even if you do have something like that set up where you have three campaigns, one for each top level category, you might find that there's a whole subset of products that are not getting touched. And so then we'll block those out from those campaigns and put them in a new one. Obviously making sure you have enough budget to run each one successfully.
Okay, and then one level deeper from the campaign, where do you use asset groups? What do you use them for?
So asset groups are very good for basically product themes. So let's say you have a separate campaign for each high level category, but there's different subcategories. There's different visuals that you might want to put with each one. There's different search themes, different audience signals. I think one thing I don't like when people do is put the same products in multiple asset groups with different audience signals, because that doesn't really do anything. An audience signal is not like real targeting. It's just telling the system these are people who might buy from me. Use that as a suggestion. And so you want to make sure that it's really segmented around product themes or category themes, as opposed to audiences or first party data like that.
So that's interesting. So say that you have a running gear company, and their audience splits between trail runners, marathon runners, and casual weekend joggers. They might all buy the same shoe, the same shirts, shorts, etc. Your advice then is not to have different asset groups, even though there's, I mean, I could clearly imagine they would resonate with different visuals in the ads and different core messaging in the
Right.
ads.
So if you have different landing pages and completely different messaging, yes. But I've seen so many accounts where it's basically like the same asset group duplicated with different audience signals. Like in effect, trying to, like, imagine it was demand gen campaign where you have different audiences with the same ads. That would actually work because it's targeting your audience. But in PMax, the asset group audience signals aren't really targeting, so it's only worth making them separate asset groups when the messaging is different and when the landing page is different.
Interesting. So that kind of harkens back to the days when people would put all three match types of a keyword in the same ad group, and they
Yeah.
would claim that it was because they got more traffic that way. When in fact, the one broad match would have covered all match types
Right.
equally. And you could have used the segment to get your reports to understand what was working and what wasn't. So you're saying a lot of you advertisers now kind of make that same mistake with audiences in
Yeah.
asset groups when it's not really necessary unless you have different landing pages.
Right. Landing pages and creative.
Yeah. Okay, and then do you go one level below that in terms of grouping your products in those asset groups?
So I typically do just because I want to see how everything's performing. But from a targeting and performance perspective, it's not really needed for PMax. It's more for us to watch how everything's performing. And a lot of times we'll go through the more granular listing groups and exclude maybe a specific product or a subcategory that's just not performing well. And either drop it into maybe a standard shopping campaign with much lower bids, or just exclude it completely.
Great. Okay, that's awesome specific advice. People hopefully love this, so thank you, Menachem, for that. Now, let's talk about what is your biggest frustration. I'm a big vibe coder. I love using technology to solve problems. And like, what is one thing that frustrates you in the industry right now? I don't know if I can help with it, but like, what should somebody go out there and fix?
What should somebody go out there and fix? That's a good one. I think AI has got to slow down. It's a little too fast in the ad platforms. Like, real businesses rely on this to provide food for their families, and it's just AI, AI, AI. Like, we still got to prove it out. It's definitely very valuable, and I see the value of AI in smart bidding, targeting, and performance. But like, I almost feel like we need to slow down and take a deep breath until we figure it out, and you
Well, and
know.
where does it freak you out? Because like smart bidding has been around for a long time and generally
Yeah,
gets really high marks.
yeah,
Um, right? It's learned a lot along the way, and it can fail if you don't have enough data, like you talked about. But by and large, smart bidding I think can be trusted quite well.
yeah.
So when you say like slow down, is this about creative generation? Is it about broad match always becoming even more and more aggressive, or where is your main frustration?
So smart bidding, I agree with you. It's a definitely a very well performing product. We use it pretty much everywhere except for very few scenarios like brand search or low volume lead gen. Um, so I agree with you on that one. I think like where it pushes too far is like on some of the lead gen search campaigns. The targeting is like way off base, especially like we have a lot of clients in healthcare, and is we're looking for a very specific kind of traffic, and I'd love to use broad match more, but it's if it brings a search in that's completely unrelated to what the client is trying to sell, I can't do anything with it. And so it pushes a little bit too far in certain things like that. Also in like, I think the AI for creative, it works, it doesn't work. Like the ads advisor, it works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes, but then a lot of times it gets pushed into the workflow, and it's like I just want to build a campaign. But at the same time, I should say I am very forward thinking when it comes to these things. I'm not like stuck in the past, but I just want to make sure it doesn't slow down the processes and progress that we have in place already.
So a measured level of AI is really what you're advocating for, and that makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, I think
Yeah,
we all want the guardrails, and we want to understand why the AI is making decisions and what it's doing for us, and make sure it's doing the best for our clients.
100% with you on that.
Well, good. Final question: how was the Tesla tequila that I see the bottle behind you?
I bought the empty bottle just for display purposes.
I have an empty bottle too. I bought the empty bottle from eBay because
There
I
you
couldn't
go.
get a full bottle. I was too late to get that one.
I've been told I have too much Google stuff, so I was just trying to add variety.
Yeah. Well, very good. Hey, Menachem, thank you for joining us today. If people do want to get a hold of you, like where do you hang out online, and what can you help them with?
Sure, sure. First of all, it's been a pleasure talking with you as always. If anybody wants to reach out, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, or you can visit our website, jxtgroup.com. Happy to provide a free audit if anybody needs help with their Google ads, and we're here to help.
Okay, that's a generous offer. All right, everyone, thank you for watching today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, then please do give it a like, put in some comments if you have questions for myself or Menachem. And with that, we'll wrap it up here, and we'll see you for the next PPC Town Hall.